Hello, I'm Kent Comfort with Center for Health Information and Policy, also known as CHIP. Today we are finalizing our series with Joe Sopcich regarding his experiences with his parents in a long-term care facility in his area. And we've had 3 sessions so far where Joe told the story from start to finish about what the experiences were until his parents passed away. Today, Joe is going to speak with us about from his education from this experience, and I think education is the right word. He uh, started asking himself, what are some questions I wished I had have asked or known to ask before we made the decision we made? And that's a very important cue that's going to help you, the viewer, a lot if you have these situations come up. There are some critical questions you need to know to ask. And Joe is going to be of great help to you today in this session for that. Joe, good morning. Great to see you again.
Morning, Kent. You bet. Looking
So,
forward to this.
up to this point, you have done a superb job of and very open job of talking about what happened with your family and your parents. And I know that anybody that takes the time to view this, it's really going to open their eyes. And so today you're going to help them understand here are some things I need to know and make sure I know before I make a final decision about my loved one or myself, even in this regard. So I'm very, very excited to see this final session and to hear what you have to say about this. So please go right ahead and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Kent. I think the one of the most important, obviously, clearly the most important thing you do at this time in your life, if you're blessed to have your parents still around, there comes a time when they are in need of a place where they can live and have certain amenities. And because they no longer can really care for themselves the way they used to. And in the case of for example, when you're actually trying to find a place, you feel a lot of pressure. You feel pressure from a time frame that, gosh, there's lots of things to be done with regards to your parents, their assets and their home, and also having a better grasp of their financial resources. In our case, something which we really didn't have much of a clue of, because Dad kept things pretty close to the vest. So you're dealing with all this stuff. In the meantime, you're trying to find a place. And when we went through this, our approach was to visit a variety of places in the metropolitan area, and then do some research, look up surveys, look up reports on on places standings and all. But very most importantly at that time for us is that we'd walk into a place and you would immediately get a grip on, wow, this is really clean. There's no urine smell. Everyone here is very professional, and they approach it in a very professional manner. And you start making your judgments based on those kinds of things. And you develop a sense of trust, because you're kind of at their mercy. And if they tell you something's going to be good, we can do this and that, you really believe them because you want to believe them, because you've got to make a decision. You have to move on this. When I look back, there's some pretty critical things that I wish I would have asked. Usually, you're brought into a room with a salesperson. It's a conference room, and they will give you all the brochures, and they have a very nice little presentation that they can take you through. But that's all wonderful. I mean, that's all fine. But there's a really basic question that I would have thought of, because it never occurred to me. I think there's a whole series of questions you can ask about the ownership of that facility. Now, why does that matter? Well, it's critical. It's probably the most important, the most important things that you can learn about from what this organization is all about, is from who owns them. And so I think a question to ask, it would be fascinating to see the reaction you'd get if you said, who owns you? Well, they might look at you and they might give you the name of the place that's out on the sign by the road, but that may not be who actually owns the place. That could simply be like an LLC that operates the facility, but they're using that name. And so when they do that, you've got to kind of stick with it and probe and find out, no, seriously, who really does own you? Because what I didn't know till long after the fact is the place that we were looking into was owned by a private equity firm from the East Coast. And the place was purchased for, I believe, a sum plus or minus $300 million. Serious acquisition. It was part of a national, I guess, chain. And so if if they would have said, well, we're owned by a private equity firm, I would have, which is not unusual these days, I would have said, well, okay, then where are they headquartered? And then you kind of get an idea, oh, well, this is, located at one side of the country or the other. And then another good follow-up question of that is, well, how many care facilities does this entity actually own? Is it 25, 50, 100? I think there might be some out there that own 200 care facilities. So you have to ask yourself, one, why do they own them? And two, therefore, what's the actual mission of this long-term care facility for your parents? I believe that if it's owned by, if it's an investment property, which it seems becoming more and more common, the mission of the organization is to generate a profit for those who own the facility or the investors that have invested in this. Now, believe me, I'm all for profit, but do I really want that profit coming off the backs of my parents? Because what I care about is what we all would care about would be care. What kind of care? That needs to be the mission of the organization. If it's not, then you might want to have second thoughts. And in fact, if you push that topic, I think you might get some interesting feedback because no one really answers that. I think asks that. They take it for granted that the name on the sign outside is who actually owns that facility. So think about that. Oh, and by the way, if it's owned with the mission of profit, I would promise you that will affect how the staffing goes, the services provided, the food that's available, because in every case, those things will be whittled down to the bare necessities so they can generate profit. And to generate that profit, they will then raise their prices, lower expenses, increase revenues, and you've got a successful investment enterprise. And so it's very, very important to have an understanding of that. So that would be the first topic that I would broach. The next one is about the actual quality of care. What kind of care? What's the quality of care? Not just in your independent living, but in your assisted living, in your acute care, in your memory care facilities. And they will say, I'm sure they're going to say, oh, it's fantastic, it's wonderful. And that's when you follow up with, okay, what's your ratio of caregiver to number of patients? I feel pretty confident you're not going to get a real exact number on that. In the state of Kansas, there's no limit. So what that means is that if you really want to reduce your labor costs, you have one person handle about 20, 25, maybe even more people. That is the worst case scenario for your family member who's in that facility. So that's an excellent question. Ask them how many full-time nurses they have on staff. Are they there in the evening? Are they there at 3 o'clock in the morning? Another very good question. And also ask, it's really nice seeing this facility in the middle of the day. I mean, of course, you're going to see independent living, which is like a super nice apartment complex, but maybe you'd like to take a visit to assisted living or acute care during the evening. See how many people are working, seeing what's going on with everybody. That was something, these are things that I failed to ask and I failed to do. And I think if we had, it might have given us more information from which we could have made a decision. Because those things are very, very important. Another question is, would you mind if I set up video cameras in my parents' room? Some organizations will let you do that, others won't. In the case of ours, we were very lucky. This organization let us put cameras in the rooms. We had to pay for them. And it gave us immediate access. And you could also converse through the cameras, immediate access to see what our parents were doing, who was caring for them, and how that care was going. My sisters lived out of town, and they would tune into that all the time. I mean, they saw my mother when she fell out of bed, how people just kind of stood around because I don't know if they didn't know what to do, but they were all just kind of standing around looking at her as she laid on the floor. That is something that you never have known about. I promise you, you never would have known about that incident if you didn't have a recording from that video camera that we had installed. So these are types of really basic questions, but things that you never think about. And the one position that you don't want to be in, you don't want to be in a situation down the road where maybe you've had some unpleasant things happen to your loved one, and you look back at yourself and you're thinking, why didn't I ask those questions? And why didn't I pursue the answers? Because if they don't want to give you the answers, then they're hiding something. And do you really want to put your loved one, your parents in a facility that's hiding something from you when you're going to be when you'll be paying so much money for what you think is going to be good care. So Ken, that's kind of a pretty quick assessment of some key points that I just don't know if everybody thinks about. And the reason they don't is because they've got so much going on and so many different things they're kind of trying to deal with at the same time.
Th- uh, that's just priceless, Joe. In fact, I want to interject real quick here. I would like to encourage you and invite you to write a blog, write on this very topic. I think this is important to publish on the CHIP website, titled "What I Wished I Had Have Known to Ask," or something to that effect, because this is priceless information. Now, I also want to add. You didn't really make a mistake not doing this. What would possibly be a reason for knowing to do this without having a lot of prior experience? Nobody knows this, and and the reasons you said for not doing it because of how effective they are at displaying an appearance that makes it seem like it's not even necessary to do this. They're good at it, and of course you fell victim to it, as would anyone who hasn't had experience with this. So this nails it, Joe. The reality that people need to know these things because they don't know what they're walking into. They just don't.
Yeah, I agree with you totally on that. And I think for some people, they they don't want to admit or accept the fact that their parents might be receiving substandard care. Therefore, you're not going to talk about it as much. You're not going to share that fact. You kind of keep it to yourself. And that's a hard thing to keep down deep inside of you. I think these types of opportunities that try to at least open people's eyes that, hey, there might be some things you can do early on that could benefit your parents down the road. I think it's very, very important.
You're so right. Now, a question. You've mentioned before that an inclination to feel guilty, even though you kind of shouldn't, because there was nothing intentional about what you did or didn't do. But perhaps one of the reasons why people aren't inclined to share with their friends, their neighbors, and what have you, because they feel guilty about putting mom in a place that has this kind of thing happen to her. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you you just no matter you just remember, I mean, you remember how your parents trusted you to be able to make the right calls, to make the right decisions on that. My parents were absolutely amazing people. um, but and they made amazing decisions throughout their whole lives with regards to finances and stuff like that. I mean, I look back and it's like, wow, you guys were just write a book about how you've done this. But at this point in their lives, they're kind of looking to you for guidance and looking for you for help on this. And so if you feel if you feel you didn't do all your due diligence, then you let them down. And so that is something that you take with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow. There's just aren't words I can find to talk about how helpful this is, how valuable this is, and how much we appreciate, Joe, you're being willing to put yourself on the block, I'm going to say,
All right.
about this topic. Yes,
Well, you just maybe some things can be done. And the whole thing is that after this was all over, and I mentioned this, really there are other things that you think you could be doing with your time. But perhaps if you can help one individual, one family, not experience some of the stuff that we experienced, and what I'm saying is what we experienced was bad. It was horrible. I believe others are experiencing a lot worse. And if you can somehow help people so that doesn't happen to their loved one, and they don't have to have the sense that they're going into this totally all alone, then it's worth it.
it,
And
it
I
absolutely
think
is. Yes,
That's what we're all working on here.
that's
We're
right.
trying to make a difference and help people.
Right. And,
So
and people like yourself who are willing to come forward and share their story, we're in hopes that as we share this widely, we'll attract people who have ideas and suggestions and solutions that ought to be evaluated, because we know that there are certain channels that we wish we could rely on to address this and help us. They're not going to be there. They're
yeah,
not.
and I know, like, if you're going to buy a car or you're even going to buy a home, there's so many different resources that you can tap into to learn more about the whole process, about the product. In this case, you think there might be resources out there, but I feel confident that those resources aren't really very accurate.
They're not that. Well, not only that, they've been co-opted by the industry. There's
Right.
that's
And
it.
so
So
now, so now
that's an
you're
excellent
making one,
comparison. That's an important comparison.
you're making one of the most important decisions in your life and certainly in your parents' life, and you're doing so without accurate information.
Right.
And I think if that's something that we could perhaps be a part of to provide people with a constructive analysis of certain facilities, then I think that could maybe make a difference.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Joe, thanks again so much for helping us out with this. And I really do want you to think about writing a blog about the uh, things that people need to be advised and warned about to learn before they make a final decision. I think that would be very valuable. And we appreciate all you do for us, and look forward to another session sometime.
Kent, thanks so much for the opportunity. Very much appreciated.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Bye, Kent.